In the deepest and most hidden recesses of the gloomy caves of the mountains dwell horrendous and evil beings that threaten to destroy humans. According to Cantabrian mythology, the Ojáncanu were terrible gigantic creatures, with a terrifying and nauseating appearance, who loved violence and misconduct. These terrible creatures were enormous ogres, with only one eye, with terrifying giant warts, and whose enormous eyes glowed in the dark with an intense red color as if they were a bonfire. Despite having only one eye, it is believed that the Ojáncanu possessed an impressive vision. They possessed enormous strength and destroyed everything in their path, and were considered to represent cruelty and anger. Their bodies were covered with coarse reddish hair, and they had long red beards with a single white hair, which according to the stories would be their only weakness. Their thick legs would be similar to giant buildings, very powerful and strong as well as their elongated arms, and these hostile creatures had 10 toes on each foot and hand. It is said that during the cold winter nights, deep in the Cantabrian forests, you can hear the thick and terrifying voices of these creatures, since that is where they go hunting most often. So you could hear terrifying conversations of these creatures as they searched for their victims. The Ojáncanu lived in large hidden tribes of which no one knew their location, since their entrances were completely closed, with large rocks camouflaged with leaves and branches of the forest so as not to be seen. So there are those who claim that these monstrous beings still live in the depths of the mountains. The females of the Ojáncanu were even more perverse and terrifying than the ogres, with a hostile and horrifying aspect. The Ojáncanu women tasted even more violence and cruelty. Unlike the males, the females lacked hair on their bodies, revealing their huge breasts that hung down to the ground. They even had to put them on their backs to be able to run. Unlike the males, they had 2 small eyes that were always covered with disgusting gunk. They had long, bulky hair that covered much of their body, and their yellowish teeth protruded from their mouths, revealing 2 sharp fangs with which they tore flesh to shreds. The Ojáncanu fed on acorns, sheep, cows, birds, bats, and robbed fishermen of their trout and eels. On some occasions, they went down to the valleys and stole the cornstalks, and devoured all the animals around them. The myth narrates that the Ojáncanu women were such evil and corrupt creatures that even their own husbands were afraid of them. For the females, the most delicious delicacy on earth was human children, whom they abducted when they were only hours old or lost in the thick forests. These perverse beasts kidnapped the newborns and took them far away to the mountains to devour them. So, with the passing of time and the deep fear of the appearance of the Ojáncanu women, humans began to protect their children with perfumes of holy water, in order to prevent them from being abducted by the horrendous ogres. When their infant victims were not available, they had to make do with eating other kinds of animals, which they accumulated in their deep, dingy dens. The birth of the new Ojáncans was marked after the death of one of its members. For it is said that when an old Ojáncanu died or was killed by other ogres because of his old age, he was buried under a large tree in the forest. Afterward, large and nauseating yellowish worms would sprout, giving off a rotten smell, which had to be suckled by the Ojáncanu women. After several months of the death of the Ojáncanu, the females had to be always aware of the appearance of the creepy worms, because they would be the ones in charge of assuring the birth of more ogres for the tribes. The Ojáncanu women, upon seeing the terrible worms come out of the earth, would take them in their large arms and suckle them, until little by little they would grow and become truly gigantic ogres. When the orange men came out of their hidden places, they left clear evidence that they had been walking or hunting in the woods, for in times of wind, especially on the forest roads, hundreds of trees were found uprooted and felled by the hands of the hostile ogres. Because they had so much hair and long scalps, these would get entangled in the branches, causing them to be in a bad mood and take revenge on everything in their path, pulling the trees from the ground. In addition, these nauseating beings enjoyed making humans suffer, since it is believed that when they were bored, they would take large rocks from the mountains and place them in water sources, destroy the crops of the peasants, kidnap women and princesses, or leave cows without limbs or in the bones. Likewise, these beasts were the ones who sowed resentment, pride, envy, and theft among the locals, inducing them to fail. It is thought that the Ojáncanu could even transform itself into an old beggar, thus managing to enter the villages and taking advantage of the night to kill sheep, chickens, and cows, also destroying the villages, but always fleeing before dawn, so as not to be discovered. Also, the ogres had the ability to transform themselves into other forest creatures such as wolves and snakes, which helped them in the hunt. The mountain shepherds feared it as the devil himself, and used to sing a song as an incantation in order to scare the monstrous being from their properties. "I hope you go blind, bastard Ojáncanu, to pull out your white hair and die cursed," said the peasants when they felt that an ogre was nearby. Thus, if by any chance the Ojáncanu heard him, he would rush upon his flocks and annihilate them with a single blow. It is supposed that the only way in which these creatures were annihilated was only if someone managed to blind his only eye and pull out the long gray hair that hangs from his bushy beard. But also, the ogres could die if they fed on forest mushrooms or wild strawberries, as it was highly allergic to these foods, similar to a potent poison. His only friends were the monstrous cudgels and crows, which used to report new victims wandering the woods. On the other hand, it is said that their main enemy was the Ojáncanu, since these creatures were the opposite of the Ojáncanu, as they were full of kindness and gentleness. On the other hand, a version of the myth narrates that every 100 years a kind Ojáncanu was born, which commonly moved away from the violent tribes of its species, to make a solitary life helping humans and living in peace. It is said that even these could be caressed by men and that he guided those who were lost in the forests, also warning of the arrival of evil Ojáncanu.